Hi, I'm Graham Richardson-Locke. I'm the Head of Associations and Technical Lead at FESPA, and welcome to the FESPA Sustainability Spotlight video series. We understand that sustainability is the future of business success and is driving our need to reduce negative environmental and societal impacts that are essential to our communities. We're providing information with the help of our guest speakers, thank you, Dominic, that will support environmental best practice and enable you to make progress on your journey. In today's video, I'll be talking with Dominic Harris, co-founder of CarbonQuota. I'm not going to introduce Dominic further than that. I'm going to let him do a better job of it himself. So, Dominic, firstly, welcome.
Thank you.
Perhaps you can tell our viewers something about you and your background.
Yeah, sure. Look, listen, firstly, thank you, Graham. Really appreciate being included in this such event. So, I'm, as Graham said, I'm a co-founder of CarbonQuota. We're a carbon management business operating in the print and packaging space. And the background to me, which not many people know, is that actually I've been in the print packaging space for the whole of my career. I actually started an apprenticeship when I was 16 as a lithographic planner, which most people won't even know what lithographic planner is today. So I spent the whole of my career in the industry. I'm very passionate about the industry. Did many years at Williamsley about 19, 20 years ago. And more recently have been consulting in the print industry, and clearly today run CarbonQuota with our business partner Nathan Tiller. So I've got a lot of passion for the industry, and what we do is not only because it's from a carbon perspective, not only because it's the right thing to do for climate change. It's something that I believe that our industry has the most magnificent opportunity to show leadership in how our industry can decarbonise. So there's an enormous amount of passion within me around how we can drive that within our industry. So there you are, Graham. That's a little bit of background and a few facts you don't know about me.
All right, that's great. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think I should probably share that I once spent 5 years working in military electronics in clean rooms producing circuits for a weapon system. So there's
that's more impressive than mine. Then there we are.
Well, I don't think I'm not making it a competition. I'm just grateful for your experience.
Yeah.
So today we're going to focus our discussion on what first steps printers should take when measuring carbon and think about it. So I've got a bunch of things that I want to kind of see if I can extract from you over the next.
Far away.
First thing, CarbonQuota is well known in our sector. You're a specialist for carbon measurement, but I'd like to know what's the first bit of advice you would give a printer who are just starting out.
Yeah, look, and I guess it's not easy, this stuff, right? So carbon's a technical world, carbon's a scientific world, and arguably that's why we exist, Graham, right? Because we know it's technical, we know it's scientific. But any business, big or small, should be taking climate change very seriously, and any business, big or small, need to decarbonise their operations and their products and how they perform. But the reality is, it takes some effort and it takes some money to do this sometimes. So we always say to businesses, the best place to start is in what's called scope 1 and 2, which is their operational carbon footprint, which in effect, in non-technical terms, is their factory. That always is the best place to start. The most important part to that, though, is I think before getting into how do I do it, I think the most important part they've got to understand is that you've got to get emotionally and financially aligned to what you have to do, because it's not something you do once. It's something you do continuously. It's something you need to help with your team. Your teams need to be on board. Your customers need to be able to support you. You need to support your customers. So I think that emotional and financial commitment is very important in starting any decarbonisation journey. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think the fact of the commitment is ongoing. This is not, as you say, this is not a one-off. I hear the phrase sometimes box ticking exercise.
Yeah, no, we hear that too. Yeah.
It just isn't that, is it? It's a culture shift.
Yeah.
But it's a culture shift that can reveal significant benefits at a time where brands and customers are starting to be inquiring more because of their own needs from their supply chain. So, but I'm interested, you say about committed financially.
Yeah.
Can you explain a bit more about what you mean on that one?
Yeah, so we've obviously been doing this for a long time now, and we see our customers and we see what commitments they have to make. But there's not always a massive financial commitment. But when you boil it down to kind of some simplistic examples, so if a business wanted to move from general electricity they buy from the grid to a green electricity, that fundamentally today costs more money. Okay, so therefore there has to be a financial commitment to move from one energy type to another energy type. So I think that's a really good example and something we see quite a lot. But ultimately it has to be done, right? Because we're in a climate crisis. Another example, and it's one again, I was actually discussing this morning around moving to EVs, moving to electric vehicles. Now, that's reasonably straightforward in a domestic environment because there's lots of EVs available. You've also got hybrid cars that are available. But when you move through, and you see it through a printer's lens, if they wanted an electric van, we all know they have limited range, for example. We all know there are challenges around that. So, but even that change, an electric van today is probably more expensive than a normal diesel van. So I think they're kind of two examples. What I would say though, there is that I see a lot, and I talk to lots of customers. And I was actually at an event, Graham, as we said earlier. I was actually at an event this week, and I was talking to some very, very large retailers and senior people at very large retailers. And actually, they are very clear that they want their supply chain to support their decarbonisation journey. So I would say, whilst there is a financial, a very basic financial impact, the cost of not doing, I would suggest, is much, much bigger because the customers that all printers enjoy, they're the ones that need their print supply chain to decarbonise. So I do think that it's a very, very important part, and it creates a USP. It creates them the ability to work with new customers. But actually, the time is coming where actually they've just got to do it to a degree. And sorry to be blunt, but that's a very important message. Sometimes you've just got to get on with this stuff.
And actually, I think, it puts in mind, I visited a sustainability leadership event in London just before the lockdown for COVID. And at that meeting were SmithKline Beecham, National Grid, Boots Alliance,
wow, yeah,
Dixon Group, a number of larger organizations. And I was there representing FESPA, and I was saying, what is it that you want from our members? And each of the breakout conversations I had looked at things like, well, you won't even get to work with us unless you pre-qualify to meet our sustainability standards. And then one Lloyd's Banking Group was saying that one of their printers who were doing report and booklet type work were already, so this is, a couple of years back, were already offering carbon footprinting choices of print stocks and print combinations for formats for the products. And so I think it's easy when you're an SME, it's easy to forget what's going on with larger brands and not to see the cascading demand. But usually, even if you're not working directly with that brand, and you're working through an agency or through a smaller partner, you will find that this stuff creeps up on you. So I totally agree that the cost of not doing it is the critical factor.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's just so clear now. We see it every single day now.
So in terms of examples, it'd be quite nice to have a few examples from sectors that you are involved with.
Yeah, so we you know, we're in a lucky position where we have actually two types of customers, Graham. So we are very lucky to deal with the very large retailers and the large FMCG businesses, but at the same time, we're equally lucky to deal with their supply chain. So that gives us a very nice perspective on the world, because I talk to Procter and Gamble. I also talk to Procter and Gamble suppliers, so you can get, you know, both sides of the story as such. But you know, an example would be the big retailers, and mainly around grocery, you know, the supermarkets that we all go to day in, day out. There has been for some time now a requirement that some of those big retailers are insisting that every time they receive a print quotation for a project from their printer, they not only want to see the price on the quotation, they also want to see the carbon footprint on the quotation. Okay, and that type of behaviour, you know, we've seen it now for almost probably 18 months, but that's becoming more and more commonplace. And the reason the big mega brands are doing this stuff is that they want to be able to make a choice on how they spend their money, but also have a choice on, do they buy on price or do they buy on carbon? So if you give them the price and the carbon next to the, within the specification, they can make the decision on, do they find a job that's slightly more expensive but a lower carbon version. They start making that decision. So it's a very, very powerful tool, not only for the print suppliers who are supporting them, but equally for them as a big corporate who are responsible for the carbon of the printer. They can make the decision on how that job is produced. And we see more and more of that across the luxury brands, certainly the retailers, and not just the biggest ones, of course, but even the mid-sized retailers, and certainly within the the FMCG and the pharmaceutical industries, we're seeing more and more and more of that work come through.
Okay, but you said that the best place to start for a printer is scope 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that doesn't provide product level carbon footprinting. That's about operations.
Yeah.
So that's not helping with your previous point.
No, that's a good point. It's a good point. No, absolutely, you are 100% right, Graham. There, it does not. So, but this is the challenge, right? Is that businesses in reality, printers should have looked at scope 1 and 2 2 or 3 years ago. Okay, but we all know many businesses haven't, and actually there's a very good reason for that. We've had a very challenging 2 or 3 years, but ultimately businesses need to get to the place where they can provide product carbon footprinting. So yes, you start with scopes 1 and 2 if that's all you can afford and all you want to do, but the reality is you've got to rapidly catch up and be able to do scopes 1, 2 and 3. And technically that's a product carbon footprint, and it needs to be done. It needs to be done at a rate of knots, in our opinion, because there's customer pressure, lots of customer pressure coming. There's clearly a climate crisis, and all of those elements together mean that businesses just have to get on with this stuff. So I agree with your point. Yeah, absolutely, it is a different world, but ultimately, there's a pace thing here that needs to happen.
Yeah, and I suppose the larger corporates have been required to report on carbon for a long time now. This is not new for PLCs. This is quite long established in terms of the reporting that so it's the fact that we're within the supply chain, and if we want to remain in the supply chain, we have to consider it. And actually, even if we aren't in directly working with those major brands, but we're working with smaller businesses. The business advantage of being able to offer carbon footprinted products with useful information for smaller brands. There are lots and lots of aspirational brands, aren't there? Small, young businesses who are looking for transparency, who are looking for information that provides a better story to their consumers. And you know, they may be small today, but if we work together, I think there's a lot to be said about not just restricting our thinking to what's leading the march, which is brands, but also thinking about how individuals in business are changing their attitudes because of climate emergency. It's
so we work a lot with we've got a number of our customers are startups, and they're startups that work within the coffee space or within the hair product space, and these are very small, very young startup organizations that are selling product online. And they absolutely, what we do for them is product carbon footprinting, because if you're selling a packet of coffee to a consumer via some sort of e-commerce solution, the consumer wants to know what the carbon impact of that is. And that's, we're seeing that. So it's not just the big players that are doing this, it goes all the way down to the smallest little startups, because it is the most important subject right now.
Yeah. And I think to your point of the economic pressures of the current time, macroeconomics, energy costs, they're one of maybe the little icings on the cake is that energy is so expensive that there are two benefits in that, if I can say it that way. If you're making an investment in energy saving, the return on investment is that much quicker given where we are. So it's just the fact that you need to get involved. You need to be doing the analysis, doing the thinking, and then offering that back as a benefit. I'm just thinking here about the kind of slightly overwhelming sense of how much there is to do. So I'd be quite interested to get into how to measure product carbon footprint, and just if you can flesh out a sense of the steps that that are available.
Yeah, sure. Look, and look, I'm not going to make this a carbon quota pitch, but ultimately, anybody who wants to get into product carbon footprinting, the first thing to remember is it is a scientific thing that needs to be done, and we often talk to customers that have attempted to do it themselves and realize very quickly it needs specialist sort of teams to do it. So, but ultimately a printer would have the choice, kind of three choices, Graham. They could employ an external consultant to come in and do a product carbon footprint, but that's traditionally how the marketplace used to work. Consultants coming in, it tends to be quite expensive. It tends to be very slow because it's manual, a man in front of a computer doing something. So that's kind of the first option. There are some third-party tools in the market. There's some great third-party tools in the market. They have a challenge that they firstly require the specification to be input into the third-party tool, but more importantly, what that means is those tools also use average information. So it's not carbon data relating to the printer that's actually producing the job. It's carbon data that's based on some sort of average data. So there's some question marks around the sort of quality of that carbon footprinting. And it's not that it's wrong, it can just be better. So that's option two, really, is use a third-party tool. And then of course, people can talk to us or any other specialist organization that exist. And we've spent a lot of time, Graham, building our reputation as the high quality, granular scientific business. We set the bar very high deliberately because we knew that's what's very important to to our customers and our customers' customers. You know, we've developed some very cool automated applications now. And we built calculators that integrate into the back of the printer's MRS applications as a really great example. And we found that to be very, very, very successful. And a lot of the UK printers are enjoying using that right now.
I mean, I can see why, because if you're an estimator, having a standalone or an integrated method for calculating, you know, my experience of estimating is that our customers want their information quick.
Yeah.
And unless you're an estimator with 2 brains and 4 arms,
Mm-hmm.
that'd be yes, there's the challenge. So, mate, can you tell us a bit more about where your integrations are and what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, look, so what you just described actually was the reason we did this, is that it's a speed thing, but more importantly, if you're an estimator at a printer, you just want to carry on doing the same job you were doing yesterday. So that was the whole premise of we built something that was very easy for the printers to use. So we've integrated into Tharston, Print IQ. We're just integrating at the moment into Optimus. We've integrated into Emtivity, a system called Digital Specs, and then there are many, many more that are lined up through our sort of development roadmap. And the whole premise of it is, you know, like I said just now, is that to make it as simple as possible, but get it to the highest possible levels of science. So I saw a demo yesterday of it in the live environment, and literally the estimator put the estimate into, is actually Tharston in this example, hit save, and the carbon footprint appears instantly on the Tharston estimate. And they didn't even know it happened in 0.2 of a second, and just happened seamlessly. And that's just a very important part of it. And what it also allows us to do, Graham, which I think is the secondary piece, is do carbon footprinting at scale. And I saw yesterday, like I said, I was looking at some technology that we developed, and we did 100,000 carbon footprints, and I'm not exaggerating, 100,000 carbon footprints so far this month. Now that is just phenomenal. Now, I will say that they're not unique jobs. It might be the estimate that's come through might have had 5 or 6 different quantities, but it's still 100,000 carbon footprints.
That is a ton of calculations, isn't it?
It's a ton of calculations, but it's all done automatically. So, it's just a big, very, very powerful database.
And something about, I might go slightly off topic, but I'm kind of interested in the end-to-end parameters. So and maybe now's not the time for this, but if our viewers want to get in touch with you after, can they understand where you start the calculation from and where you end it? Because I think there is a scope question, isn't there, about calculation? And if you know, to make a kind of a frankly ridiculous suggestion, if you start with crude oil, that leads to synthetic polymers, that leads to, you get my point. It just those are unworkable supply chains due to complexity. But I think it is useful for people to know where the start and end points are, so that they're comparable and so they can explain it. Is that something that's kind of baked into your proposition?
So your point around whether it's a fiber-based product or a polymer-based product, ultimately we have a enormous database of almost every type of material. So when you look at an emission factor, a carbon footprint of a certain type of paper, that is of that paper per ton or per kilogram. So therefore anything down or upstream from that material has been calculated within the material carbon footprint. But then what we also do is then so that bit covers your question, I think, Graham, is that all source materials include everything you've mentioned, and that's the work that we've been doing over the past sort of 3 or 4 years now, building that enormous database of carbon footprints. But then when it moves into the production environment, we can, look at different machine types. And the greatest example of that is if you had a litho machine versus a digital machine. Because a digital machine uses less energy, it has a lower carbon footprint. So again, there's some very obvious things there to help decarbonise at a product level. But then we keep going through that route. So we've done materials, we've done production, we then do delivery, okay? And that delivery is dependent on where it gets delivered to. If we know it's delivered to an address or a consumer or one retail shop, that's how the carbon footprint will be calculated. It just so happens that lots of deliveries are into warehouses and they may then get forwarded on, there on into a different address. So the delivery area is slightly more complex, but it does get included in the carbon footprint. But we also do, of most importance, is the end of life. So we have, within our database, we've created a series of assumptions on what happens to a product, depending on what type of product it is. So if it's a glass bottle, that is highly likely going to end up on curbside recycling, and it's highly likely going to, it'll get recycled at 80% within the UK. So you create your carbon footprint from those metrics. If it's something that probably won't end up on curbside or may end up in industrial waste, again, we have various statistics that say, on average, this type of material can get recycled and does get recycled. So
you effectively have a benefit factor attached to the reusability of.
It does.
Okay, brilliant.
It does, yeah, it does. It's very clever. So to answer your question, it's almost cradle to grave. The only complication is the bit in the middle, which is delivery. So we may not even know where it's going to. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So earlier we talked about the financial commitment to this. Obviously, part of the part of the process of scope 1 and 2 is to look at where your hotspots are. It will identify what aspects of your business have the highest emissions factors, and then you can drill down and look at those and think, right, okay, so if I look at my insulation and that has a knock-on effect on gas usage reduction, that will reduce my carbon emissions in that way. It seems to me that the CarbonQuota have a particularly sort of sophisticated top level product, but I'm interested to know the sort of where the entry level comes in, and then the kind of, and if you can share roughly the subscription or the cost per month to use that, and then what you get if you're using premium products. So can you go into that a bit, please?
Yeah, sure, of course I can. So the premium product is actually a product we've had for a couple of years now, and it's used by most, if not all, of the very large print companies who support retail, and that's typically reasonably expensive thing to do, a couple of £1,000 a month type price. But what it does, it pushes the supplier to carry out their annual operational carbon footprint, scope 1 and 2, and it allows for a very detailed product carbon footprint that's typically suited to a very large complex print product, like a 3-dimensional unit. They tend to be very complex.
Yeah. So
that's the pro product, and it's very successful, and it works very well for the bigger businesses. But what we found was that there are, if you look in the UK, I think the last count there were 7,000 printers in the UK, and there's only a very, very small handful of those printers that are bigger than about sort of 10, 15, 20 million a year. So there's a whole tail of small printers in the UK. So what we've done is developed what we've called an essentials product, which is a simplified carbon calculator. It works almost identical to the way the pro version works, but what it does is it calculates very precise material usage, but it won't necessarily say that the precise energy usage per supplier. because it's very much a plug and play application designed for the enormous raft of smaller businesses in the UK, and it's been given a price point to make it more attractive to those organisations. So
am I right in thinking that in that use case, you would have maybe a category for a digital press, screen print, or a litho press, but it wouldn't be, you wouldn't be looking at an operation specific plant list? Is that the kind of...
Exactly, yeah, no, exactly. So if you look at, a very, very large printer, print company, they may have 20 or 30 machines. And in the Pro version, we would go in and measure the precise energy use per machine, which takes time, it takes an implementation. You can imagine the effort that goes into that. So the Essentials version deliberately just works on some very simplistic, small, large, medium machine, and it might go digital and litho, for example, and then other versions obviously as well. So it's a much simpler thing. What we have proved though is the accuracy rating is actually much, much higher than we expect it to be. And it's perfectly suited for, certainly, point of sale, sheet fed material, but it can be used for bigger businesses, but we suspect that the bigger businesses will probably want the Pro version. But moreover, I think it's more targeted to the businesses that are, at the smaller scale, which is the majority of the companies in the UK print market.
Okay. I think during this discussion, you wanted the opportunity to show a couple of slides. So I have given you permission to share away. You can feel free to jump in with.
Yeah, look, it was really just to not necessarily to go through a sales deck, but I think a picture says 1,000 words, right, Graham? So I think that's that really helps. So I'm just having a quick share now. Can you see that on my screen, Graham?
Yeah.
Cool. So this just brings it to life, really. I think this might just help everybody. So if we look at this slide here.
Yeah,
this is just a typical, a slide that shows how things look. So ultimately, this would be the organisation's MIS system. Like I say, we've integrated into Print IQ and to Thast and doing many others as we speak. And what happens is that the actual carbon footprint appears, is sent to us. We send it back, and it exists and lives within the MIS. So when the customer on the right-hand side of the screen, or when the printer rather on the right-hand side of the screen is about to send the estimate to the customer, you can see that the carbon footprint detail appears on the estimate. Okay, so that's the power of the application. That needs no training. It doesn't need any, the estimator to be trained in any way. It's all done through our API integration on the MIS. So it's a very, very, very powerful application. And then really just to cover really the difference between the two, and this is the question you asked, Graham, I think it's quite important, is that, there is a difference clearly because there's a price difference, right? So, but ultimately the key differences between the two are that we go through a detailed implementation on our Pro system. On the Essentials system, it's very much plug and play, and that was a very purposely thing we did purposely because we want to make it as easy as possible for the printers. Okay, so in simple terms, I'm not going to go through many slides because this is really a conversation rather than death by PowerPoint. So that that hopefully gives you a little bit of flavour.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So we always get to a point where our discussions unfortunately have to come to an end because we don't have so much time available to us. But I'd like to see what your final, your closing sort of advice would be for our viewers. So I think we've had a good look at some of the considerations, but what would be your last words, Dominic?
I think that ultimately measuring carbon, okay, is something, and you called this a bit earlier actually, that if you look at it from a corporate perspective, the big businesses that we all buy stuff from every day, they've been doing this for a long time, okay, and they've got a very good grasp on what carbon means to them. But the change that's happened in the past couple of years, and it's getting up, we've seen so much more this year, is that they are relying on their suppliers now. So they've got their own house in order. They're now looking at what they call their scope 3, which is the printers. It's very much the pressure is on right now, and I recommend, whether people use CarbonQuota or not, this is not a sales pitch. It's something that needs to happen. And I think that it poses a wonderful opportunity for our industry, you know, to show leadership, as I said a bit earlier. And I just think that it's just time now, just to get on and do something. Yeah,
brilliant. And actually, my closing thoughts are about putting this into practice. And one of the things that we're doing in Munich at the Global Print Expo is a couple of our feature areas. So our Club FESPA lounge, where our members can meet and network together and have a bit of a break from walking around all the halls, has gone from being constructed from a sort of MDF vinyl, dye-sub fabric, and, you know, a whole range of materials, to which have been absolutely great and look fantastic. But this year we decided that, as we're a 4-day event, we would look towards using a material that we felt is appropriate for a 4-day event, and then and one that can be recycled very easily. So we've gone for fiberboard as the build structure. And I know that you've kindly offered to help us carbon footprint that. So visitors to the show will be able to see the impact of reduction and material selection. And the same is going to happen on the Sustainability Spotlight stand. Mm-hmm. Now, at this year's event, the Sustainability Spotlight stand will have an area where you can just sit down, chill out for a bit, which will feature a lot of sustainability material innovations. So there's going to be textile and graphic products, as well as general advice, and then also signposting through to this online content, which I think there's going to be a stack of videos, of podcasts and blogs that will bring to light many of the issues that we need to face in business. So I think at that point, I'd like to say thank you so much, Dominic.
Thank you, Greg.
It's great to have you with us. If for any reason you can't get to the show, please know that you can jump onto FESPA.com and look up Sustainability Spotlight, and there'll be a lot of information for you to gain there. And if you're a member, there's the Club FESPA online area, which has lots of exclusive articles by thought leaders in this area, but that is a members thing. So either join an association, or if you're outside of a FESPA association country, join FESPA Direct, and you can access all of that. So, thank you
very much. See you in Munich in a few weeks.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it very much indeed. All right, cheers, Dominic, and thank you everyone for watching.